If there is one thing that you need in your recipe box, it is a really good chili recipe. Whether you're watching football, tailgating, or maybe it's just even a really cold fall or winter night, there is nothing better than a really good bowl of chili. And I am going to show you how to make one of the best chilies with beans that you are going to love. Alright, I started this whole video without my apron on, so let's start over. Hi everybody, my name is Susie Weinrich and welcome to Mom's Dinner. Here, we help adults feel super successful at dinner time. So if that sounds good to you, I would love to have you subscribe. We are making some chili today and I cannot wait to share this recipe with you. This is, I will give a little disclaimer, this is a chili recipe that includes beans. So if you think chili should not have beans, this will not be the recipe for you. But if you do like beans in your chili, stick around. We're gonna start our chili recipe in a nice heavy, I guess you would call this a Dutch oven, over medium high heat. And I'm just gonna add about 2 tablespoons of oil to the pot. You can use olive oil, vegetable oil, or canola oil will all work here. Then we're gonna start this recipe by doing a little bit of celery. And I like to do my celery in the chili so that it's a smaller dice, so nobody's getting a big chunk of celery in their bowl of chili. So what I like to do is take the celery and actually cut it down the middle so that you end up with 2 smaller portions. That way you can just lump all of your celery together and chop right through it. All right, that looks really good. And so I'm gonna get this added to the pot. This is, you can use 2 or 3 stalks of celery. I had some smaller celery stalks, so I did do 3. Now we want to get to chopping our onion. This recipe calls for 1 large onion. I have 2 kind of smaller onions, so I'm actually gonna chop both onions and get those added to the pot. You want these in also just a smaller dice, so nobody's getting an enormous bite of onion in their chili. I swear those onions get me every single time. It looks like 1½ onions is going to be just right, so I'm gonna save this little half for another recipe. And finally, we need 3 garlic cloves, just minced up, and we'll get those added to the onions and the celery. I always like to crack my garlic with the blunt side of my knife and the heel of my hand. And that cracks the shell, and then you can peel it really easily before you chop. Get that garlic added, and then we're gonna give this a little stir so that all the veggies will start to soften, and we will just let this saute for about 5 minutes. The celery and onions and garlic are looking really good. So while that finishes, let's talk a little bit about the ground beef that you wanna have for your chili. So what I recommend is using an 85-15 ground beef instead of an 80-20. With an 80-20, you're gonna get a lot more fat content and risk your chili being a little bit greasy. I like the 85-15 because it has enough fat to be nice and flavorful, but not so much fat that you're gonna have a pot of greasy chili. The other thing I like is to find a ground beef that has kind of these loose ribbons in the packaging. I find that this ground beef has a little bit better texture than the ground beef that comes in like a tube or a brick. And you will need 1 pound up to 1.5 pounds of ground beef for this chili. So I think that we can go ahead and add our ground beef in. And let me tell you about one of my very favorite kitchen tools. I am not one to just have kitchen tools just because it's the latest gadget, but I love this tool. This little thing is called a meat masher, and this is what it looks like. And it makes really quick work of mashing up ground beef Or if you have stickier meat like ground turkey, ground chicken, or especially ground sausage, it works through that perfectly. Ground beef is cooked through perfectly at this point. So now we want to drain most of that grease out of the pot so that our chili doesn't end up greasy. And this is how I like to do it. If you have a different way that you like to drain the grease, let me know in the comments. But I like to just push all of the ground beef and veggies to one side of the pot. And then I tip the pot up so that most of the grease runs to one side of the pan. I like to take a little bunch of paper towels and plop that down in there. And then I just take some tongs, soak up all that grease. And then I take this little bunch of paper towels, pop it down in the sink so that it will cool for a little bit, and then I'll pop it in the trash. That's how I like to drain my ground beef when it's time to get rid of all that grease. Now it's time to add some of our canned ingredients. So what you're gonna need is a 15-ounce can of diced tomatoes. You wanna just leave the juice in. You're gonna use the whole thing. So add that in there. Then we're gonna have a 4-ounce can of diced green chilies, 16 ounces of tomato sauce. You need 1 can of Great Northern beans that's drained. You wanna drain this bean, which I did earlier today. And then you also want a 15.5-ounce can of chili beans in sauce. This one you do not drain. You want all of the sauce and the liquid that's in this can. Okay, then I'm gonna give this whole pot a stir, and then we are going to add in all of our delicious spices. We're gonna start with 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1 teaspoon of cumin, and in my mind, this is what makes it chili. 1 heaping tablespoon of chili powder. We're gonna do 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, which may seem like a funny ingredient, but the sugar actually balances all of the tomato content in your chili. 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, a pinch of red pepper flakes, and if you like it a little spicy, add more. These last 2 spices add just a little depth of flavor that you don't expect in chili. And you're not gonna be able to pick these flavors out. It's just gonna add warmth and deepness to all of the other flavors. So we are going to add just a pinch of allspice. And we're gonna add a pinch of clove. Clove is one of my favorite spices. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. It's one of my favorite spices in the spice cabinet. I don't use it very often. It is very strong, but I absolutely love the flavor and the smell. A little goes a long way, so you definitely just want a pinch of clove. Then we're also gonna add 1 bay leaf to the chili. It's not a flavor that you're going to be able to pick out, but it is gonna add a nice earthy richness to the soup. This will come out at the end though. You do not leave the bay leaf in. Then we have these 2 tomato sauce containers. We're gonna add 1 cup of water to the chili, but I am going to pour the water into these tomato sauce cans because tomato sauce is pretty thick and it doesn't all come out of the cans. And this way you make sure that you get every bit of that tomato sauce flavor. Now all we need to do is stir and wait. So I'm gonna give all of the ingredients a nice stir, and you're gonna see how rich and thick and hearty this chili is. At this point, I'm going to turn the heat down to like a medium-low to low. And I'm just going to put the lid on kind of cattywampus so that there's still some room for the steam to escape. And I'm just going to let this simmer for about 30 minutes. I'll come back and check on it every once in a while and give it a stir to make sure the tomatoes are not burning to the bottom. And then it's going to be time to eat. This chili looks perfect. It's thick and hearty and delicious looking. It smells amazing. While it's simmered for the past 30 minutes, it's concentrated a little bit, so the flavors are super robust. This is going to be your new go-to chili recipe, I promise. Now we have to fish out the bay leaf. So how I like to do that is I usually am just stirring and stirring, there it is, until it surfaces, and then I'll just pull it out and I'll just put it here on the cutting board, and once it cools, I'll just pop it in the trash. Now it's time to take a bite. I hope that this doesn't burn my mouth, but I can't wait. That is so good. It's a little bit spicy from the red pepper flakes, but the meat and the beans and the celery and the onions and the tomato chunks, super hearty and really, really delicious. So this fall and winter, I hope that you give this chili recipe a try, and let me know what you serve it with and how it turns out for you. And of course, as always, I hope this chili recipe helps you feel like a success at dinner time. We'll see you next week.